Seklusyon is directed by Erik Matti, written by Antonsi Santamaria, and stars Ronnie Almonte, Neil Ryan C., Red Bustamante, and Phoebe Walker. And Seklusyon is about a group of deacons who enter into a ritual of seclusion 7 days before they're to become priests. But around the same time they enter seclusion, a mysterious girl called Angela, played by Red Bustamante, arrives and strange things start to happen. Now, of all the new films screening at this year's Metro Manila Film Festival, this was the one I was really most excited to see, mostly because of Erik Matti. I really enjoy his work as a genre filmmaker. I really enjoy Tik Tik and Kubot. I liked On the Job, but I loved Honor Thy Father, so I really wanted to see what he would make next. So it does sadden me to say that I was disappointed by Seklusyon, because as a horror film, it's not really that effective in my opinion. You know, the horror sequences do bite off more than they could chew. I think the writing is kind of thin and can't really support the big ideas in the film, although these big ideas are better explored through the movie's fantastic visuals. The first thing you should know about Seklusyon is that you should not go into it expecting to be scared, in my opinion at least. Not because it's a Filipino movie, because we do have scary horror films, but because the horror parts in Seklusyon either overstay their welcome and end up not feeling that scary anymore, or they kind of become more complicated than they, ought to be. Because the scariest parts in the movie are seen in the trailers, and they're done in like really simple ways. When you see like the giant statues of the saints and Mary walking in the background, like that's scarier than any of the other imagery that's really put front and center in the film. And it doesn't really help that the editing in the movie doesn't allow us to feel like events are building up to these scares. When the scares start happening, they kind of happen pretty abruptly, and then from then on, they're kind of scattered out throughout the entire film. You don't really feel what lots of good horror movies do when they make you anticipate events and then there's this big payoff. Like here, I feel like it's all payoff with no anticipation. I do feel like the film could have been a lot creepier if they made us feel like we were in a secluded place just like the characters, because it's a lot louder than I think the movie should have been. And in terms of editing, there's this really out-of-place subplot that has to do with the character of Neil Ryan C. that really just feels completely shoehorned into the main plot. Speaking of Neil Ryan C., his character is like there's just nothing to him. He exists purely as a plot device, and so the audience can learn information through him. And when we learn information, this info is literally put up on screen in words, and it's just spoon-fed to the audience. So there is no sense of discovery of us unraveling the mystery behind Angela. And speaking of characters, these 4 deacons really just are defined solely by their trauma and nothing else. Yet we never really get to understand why this trauma means anything to them, so we as an audience really don't feel for these characters on an emotional level. And maybe one of the most disappointing things to me about Seklusyon was the character of the nun played by Phoebe Walker, because they hint at an interesting relationship between her and Angela, but they never go anywhere with it. And I feel like if they focused on that a lot in the film, it would have, given this movie like a lot of uniqueness compared to other horror films and a lot of other religious films. And yes, this movie has a lot of big ideas in it, but it just doesn't know how to distill these ideas into dialogue, so the dialogue ends up feeling really confused, like they don't know really what they're talking about. In terms of acting, most of these actors are competent, but unfortunately, I really just couldn't latch on to Ronnie Almonte as the arguable protagonist of the film, because he tries to deliver this restrained performance, but he ends up being just too bland. But on the positive side, because there are still a lot of good things about Seklusyon, Red Bustamante, who is the little girl who plays Angela, is really the star of the show. She is so good, and she manages to pull off the creepiness of her character without overacting. And as a director, formally, in the way he uses his camera, Erik Matti is still great and really talented. Like, he knows how to milk the dread out of just one shot going down a long hallway. Like, his direction in this movie really reminded me of James Wan's direction in the Conjuring films. But if there's one thing that Seklusyon should be commended for, it's the visuals in this movie. While the cinematography is a bit underlit in some parts for me, it still gives this film this old picture quality that really makes it feel like it was shot in the 40s where it's set. The visual effects in the movie are pretty great, and they manage to feel creepier in how they stick out from the environment. And the production design in this movie is really amazing. Like, I don't know where they shot this thing, but the place where these priests go to be secluded really feels like this old creepy haunted place that has like religious imagery just lying around. It's a really, really believable setting. In the end, I really have to say that Seklusyon is just a mediocre film for me. I think your enjoyment of the film hinges on what you think of its big ideas and whether or not you feel that these ideas outweigh the execution. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Seklusyon. If you guys have seen it, please tell me what you thought about it, and whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation, and please keep on supporting this year's Metro Manila Film Festival.